The goal is to build a relationship, connect them, help them grow so that when they become, and I can't mention the names, but the very large companies that we do work with in the country, that we've developed that support. And there's certain companies that we've been there from their very first pitch and they've exited or they've IPO'd. So I think that's that opportunity that we want to nurture and work with.
On the season finale of Sell Me This podcast, we're joined by Ian Macdonald, business and innovation leader at KPMG, and one of the most well-connected figures in the Calgary tech ecosystem. From space photos to custom Stampede boots, Ian brings his full self to a conversation on innovation, risk, and why Calgary is quietly becoming Canada's fastest growing tech hub. We dive into why he believes imagination and curiosity are the most underrated business tools available today, and how KPMG is playing the long game by supporting startups without selling them. If you've ever wondered how to build a better tech ecosystem or how to move your company from stuck to scaling, this episode is your blueprint. Let's dive in. Ian, welcome to another episode of Sell Me This podcast. We are super excited to have you here today. I know we talked about this briefly before the show, but you have the honor, or I guess I have the honor of having you as our last guest of the season. So this is our season finale of season 1.
Season finale.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Keith. Really pleasure to be here.
We have a tradition with our guests where before each episode we get to pick artwork. On the screen behind us is a Samsung Frame TV. It's a little bit of a Freudian test around what everyone picks. You picked this piece. You want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I love this piece. It's known as Earthrise. So this is the first image taken where you can see the entire Earth. And I love that idea. I'm a big space and science nerd. I'd love to go to outer space one day. It's been a dream since I was a little kid. The idea of looking back on the Earth to everything that ever was in history and every person and everything that was ever written all existed right there on that blue dot. I just think it's a fascinating photo to look back and self-reflect. So yeah, this is a very famous photo called Earthrise.
I love it. And so this is probably a question you've never been asked on a podcast, but do you think you're in your lifetime you're going to have the opportunity to go to space?
I do. Yeah, I think the affordability is coming down a lot more than when I was a kid. I applied to Virgin Galactic to work there. The idea is that I thought if I could get a friends and family discount on a ticket,
it makes it a little more palatable.
Make it a little more palatable. But no, I do think in my time there's going to be an opportunity to go to space.
That is super incredible.
Would you go to space?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I feel like there's some people that are definitely in the camp of this sounds terrifying, and I'm scared enough on an airplane, and let alone a spaceship.
Yeah.
I feel like the perspective would be incredible.
Yeah.
And I'm one of those people that thrives in the unknown.
Yeah.
And like even the opportunity, I don't know if you ever watched some of those shows, if you had the chance to go colonize Mars or live there for a couple of years or something, I would be 100% on board with that.
Yeah, it's just the flight to Mars is maybe the challenge. But getting there, once you're there, I think it'd be fascinating. By the way, Star Trek or Star Wars? What would you pick between the two?
Oh, that's an easy choice. It is. I'm Camp Star Wars 100%. What about you?
Yeah, it's actually a tough one because I grew up watching Star Trek every day after school. I come home, it's TNG, so that was a lot. But I do love the Star Wars universe. I'm a huge fan of it. So I'm tied for both. I love each uniquely, but so that's...
You did an incredible job straddling the fence there.
Yeah.
I'm not really picking either camp.
Don't want to alienate anyone on that. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. So obviously you're a staple in the Calgary community. You seem to know everyone. But tell me a little bit about yourself, about the work that you do with KPMG, and the journey that's brought you to where you are today.
Thank you. You're very kind. I don't take to flattery very well. Ian Macdonald, business and innovation leader with KPMG. I lead our high growth ventures practice, and we're based out of the Platform Innovation Center and our office in Bow Valley Square, our head office there. So the role that I'm in is quite unique, and I get a lot of people asking me, so what do you do? And so it's not something that I really boast about and share often, but when I get asked the question, I share these three main things. One is community support. How do I get involved in the ecosystem and support? How do I bring KPMG into that space and really support early stage companies and scaling tech companies? And that's the goal, is to not sell services to those companies. It's really just help provide advice and guidance, make introductions, and just help them on their way, so that when they become a scaling high growth company and they're one of the big companies that are in town right now, that there's an opportunity to work with you down the road. The second part is creating collisions, making introductions between, let's say, a clean tech startup and an oil and gas client of ours. If we can make those introductions and help them, that might lead to a pilot project. It might lead to an acquisition down the road. Who knows what it leads to, but just creating those connections is really important and valuable. And then the third part would be business development. Once a company is at a certain stage in their growth, they're a high growth company, they're scaling, they're going international, whatever it may be, that's an opportunity for us to support them with our tailored services.
That makes a lot of sense. And so you've grown a really interesting conversation that's happening here in Calgary, and you've been part of that ecosystem, especially with investments like the Platform Center. What role are you seeing the Calgary ecosystem start to play from a technology standpoint when you look at what's happening, from a larger technology standpoint, but also from a Canadian technology perspective?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of evolution in the ecosystem over the last number of years, from one that is fostering young early stage companies to now we have some incredible unicorn companies, or as we like to say in Canada, narwhals. There's an attraction now to bringing companies to the province and to the city. We're on the map for a lot of reasons. One, namely, I'll bring up a recent report, the CBRE's report from 2019 to 2023. We were found to be the fastest growing tech hub in North America. And so to put that in perspective, that's a 78% growth, 26,000 net new jobs for a total of 60,000 tech jobs in the city. So that outpaced Vancouver, Toronto, New York, Silicon Valley. It's amazing to see that growth that we've had in the tech talent itself. So from that, we've got a really great foundation that's been built, a lot of amazing organizations that are out there supporting early stage startups and getting them on their feet. And now we're into this next stage of evolution, this supporting scaling companies and seeing their growth and attracting companies internationally to come to Calgary and Alberta and across the prairies. So I think that's a really exciting next step in our evolution.
What makes Calgary so special then? Because that's high praise. Those are huge, globally renowned cities. And to have Calgary sitting right beside or ahead of those in some of those key metrics is phenomenal. So what about Calgary is so special that's drawing these folks in?
There's a couple factors, and in no particular order. So the talent side is one. The young entrepreneurs that are out there that are wanting to build businesses, sorry, young and old, I should make that clear. There are folks at all ages that are starting businesses. I would say, when I say young, though, I think of that drive and that enthusiasm and energy to start a business. So the pioneers, the people that built this province and the prairies. So we have that's fueling it. So the talent, the founders that go out and say, I want to start and build something new. That's a big factor. We have the facilitators, the organizations that are helping foster and support that, from Platform Calgary, Alberta Catalyzer, Plug and Play, 500 Global. The list goes on. There's lots of organizations that are out there, Intergen, Thin Air Labs. Again, this could be a whole podcast just dedicated to talking about people and ecosystem mapping. So there's that support that we see in the facilitation and helping support founders. The funding, that's a big factor. So from government funding, you can look at the Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund through the city and Calgary Economic Development, Alberta Innovates, Alberta Enterprise Corporation, Prairies Economic Development Canada. The funding is a big part. And the venture capital, the family and friends that cut that first check into a startup company, the funding is a really big factor that fuels that growth of the company.
And so funding is a really interesting conversation, because I feel like in Alberta and Calgary specifically, the powers that be have done a really strong job in creating some of those supports that have propped up some of these early stage organizations. And I know that there was big announcements recently around some of the OSA fund, et cetera. On the private capital side of things, I feel like there's still momentum to be had there. Yeah. And that'll be my euphemism of today, momentum to be had. But what's your perspective in terms of that capital environment in Alberta and Calgary?
Yeah, I think there's just more opportunity to invest. There's more opportunity to create awareness for family offices, high net worth individuals. But let's not forget about the corporate community as well, too. The corporate venture capital opportunity. There's a number of companies with a lot of free cash flow and money to invest, and there's lots of dry powder and money sitting on the sidelines. This is a perfect moment in our time and in our history to invest in the companies that are here. And I've got to give a shout out for our local tech companies and supporting local. When you go to the grocery store right now, you'll see maple leafs everywhere, right? It's buy Canadian, support Canadian. But if you go onto the App Store, do you see a maple leaf that says this is a Canadian app, this is a Canadian tech company, or a software platform? If you're a local company in town and you're looking to do a software implementation, do you know that's a local company that could use some support? I like to use some names as examples. A ticketing company like ShowPass, they're competing with some of the big giants out there, and they're an amazing platform that can be used. I'd love to see going to an event in Calgary where I'm using ShowPass as an example, or if I'm going to a local retailer and I'm using the payment provider is Helsum, another great local company to talk about. So that's where I think we need to do a better job of really highlighting, focusing on, and supporting those local tech companies to give them that extra boost they need.
And I totally agree with you, and I love that analogy that you're sharing around grocery shopping. Everyone's probably familiar right now with the little maple leaf, and it's changed buying patterns. You'll see like the pile of tomatoes that are Canadian grown beside the empty bin of tomatoes versus the pile of tomatoes from somewhere else that haven't quite gone yet. Is there a labeling? What's the solution to that? Or is it just more awareness? Because I feel one thing that I hear all the time is Canadians sometimes, and it might be our Canadianness, we do a really bad job of kind of telling our own stories. And we, compared to some of our neighbors, where we just aren't as self-promoting, and maybe for better or for worse. Is that a problem you think we have, or is that?
I think there's a couple things in your question there. My marketing brain side of my brain kicks in and starts to think about how do we do a better job of promoting, and that's on the companies themselves. But again, some of those companies have figured out that going right to the States and selling where there's less risk aversion and an opportunity to get into a market that's faster to adopt is a great place to go. And then try it out in the US and great, it works, and bring it to Canada. And that's still great too. You go where your customers and buyers are. There is a sentiment about our risk aversion. We're first to be second sometimes. And there is a sentiment that I've heard mentioned a couple times. How good could it be if it was built in Calgary? And I'm like blown away by hearing. That's a really surprising comment to hear. And so they look for, if they haven't established or built up enough of a presence or gotten bigger clients or whatever it may be, how do we know that it's been validated and it's been tested? And I think that's a really dangerous comment to make. And there's really some amazing companies that are here working very hard. And we've got to give them a really hard look at an opportunity to work with them, to give them business.
That comment made me step back for a second. And it doesn't, I'm not even quite sure how to respond to that. But I think that one thing you did mention where it is really alarming, and I've heard this story before, where companies are having to go external outside of Calgary, outside of Alberta, outside of Canada to get their first customers. What about the corporate environment in some of these other places like the States is making it more appealing for these companies to go get their first customers out there?
Yeah, I think just that speed to market, there's an opportunity for companies that are going to move very quickly and they're going to adopt.
And I think that it comes back to that ecosystem as well, because one of the things that I've really observed as well is there's such an incredible ecosystem around the startup community, around the innovation community, around all these people that are really challenging the status quo.
Yeah.
But there's also this kind of part B, and I come from that world, which is the more, we'll say, corporate technology side of things, which still plays it safe, which is a little more risk averse, and I think is creating some of those challenges in terms of those initial adoption points. What recommendations would you have, and what observations would you have around how we can foster more of that corporate to innovation community collaboration, and how can we kind of pour some gasoline on the fire in a positive way to create a spark there?
Yeah. Before I answer that question, I do have to ask, because there might be a first-time listener on this podcast today. Keith, tell me, Deliver Digital, tell me about what you do. Tell me the work you do.
So thank you for I guess it took till the end of the season to finally turn the microphone around. But Deliver Digital, we help businesses with how they make technology decisions. And so our story has evolved like a lot of companies over the last 2 years since we were founded. But really, we help small and medium businesses with how they make decisions around technology. And the big observation that we've had is that there's a little bit of a power imbalance. A lot of these enterprise organizations will have the cream of the crop. They'll have IT teams of tens or hundreds of people. And if I'm a $30 million construction company that has grown a really strong business, I don't necessarily have those same tools, those same frameworks, those same opportunities to look at technology as some of those larger peers. And with the opportunity that's coming with technology, sometimes I just need, for better or worse, an adult at the table to sit beside me that's been through it, that has the battle scars, that kind of knows how that ecosystem operates and works, and help me through some of these really important to our business decisions. And so the role that we play is we'll sit alongside these leaders, whether they're selecting new technology, whether they're evaluating the platforms they currently have, whether they're looking for ways to incorporate AI or new security practices or drive innovation into their businesses, and help them with a framework that makes those decisions and helps them evaluate a path forward so they get unstuck.
Awesome. And what are you hearing for, is it risk aversion? Is it a hesitancy on supporting local? What do you hear when you speak with these companies?
I hear paralysis. So the thing that I've observed from a lot of the leaders we're talking to is they're super excited about technology. You can't turn on the news, you can't go to a barbecue, you can't be sitting on the sidelines of a rink at your kid's hockey game without hearing that you need to be using technology in your business. But the problem that happens is that companies have no clue where to start. And so there's just so much noise now. And even if you think about some of the challenges that have been created from AI, some of the challenges that have been created from some of these like automated marketing and et cetera, there's so much noise coming at these buyers that they just simply opt out or they get paralyzed. And so I think that the overwhelming sentiment that I'm hearing is that I know I need to do something. Like everyone is telling me that if I don't implement AI into our business, we'll be out of business in 5 years. But where do I even start?
So the risk of not starting at all, though, is facing irrelevancy, business loss, all of those factors. So starting, though, is the biggest first step.
Yeah, and I'm sure you could even apply that to other frameworks in personal life, right? Where if sometimes the decision becomes so big that the hard part becomes making the decision. And so the ability to have someone that has been through it before sit beside you and help guide you through that is becoming more and more important.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll jump on your grocery store analogy because I just had the opportunity to do a talk at Mesh. And we shared this analogy of going to a grocery store. And everyone's been grocery shopping. Everyone has looked for the Canadian flag on there. If you were going to the grocery store and you all of a sudden on the way there hear this radio ad that these 14 ingredients that you get are now toxic. If you eat these or ingest these, you and everyone you're cooking for will perish.
Yep.
The way you go to a grocery store changes. And if you go into the grocery store, you're starting to look at every label, you're starting to examine everything, and all those decisions become super overwhelming. And then if you add all of a sudden every single product in the store now has a salesperson that's trying to capitalize on this, that, you know, the 5 different types of loaves of bread you buy all have a person standing beside them telling you why the bread is awesome. Mm-hmm. You're just going to like order takeout every night.
Yeah.
Like you're just not participating in the grocery store anymore.
My wife and I use an app when we go to the grocery store. We actually scan every barcode.
Oh, that's,
yeah. So we look into that for the score and the ranking and what are the ingredients. And okay, guess we're not having that product anymore because we've just learned something new. So yeah, we're very information driven when it comes to buying products and then supporting local on top of that too.
That's amazing. But I feel like you're the first person to turn around the questions on me.
Sorry.
That's okay. But so from that standpoint then, what are you hearing? So that's what I'm hearing from my vantage point, which is working with a lot of these leaders.
The analysis paralysis, that's definitely a factor. The speed in which technology is developing and evolving is so fast that I get it. I can see how it can be very difficult to say, if we just wait another month or another quarter, there's going to be some new AI technology that's going to be developed. And so if we've subscribed to this software, if we've implemented this technology, how do we adapt and adopt? And now we've got vibe coding, which by the time this podcast is released, everyone's going to know what vibe coding is. But no, I was sitting down with my wife talking about, okay, if you could create any app, what would you want to create? And she goes, okay, I'd love to take photos of all the clothes in my closet. And I love in the morning when I wake up, it could just give me a couple options that I could wear. And I said, okay, maybe we could add in a weather component so it would know the weather. And maybe it integrates with your calendar and it knows you're going to be in an important meeting today. So it's going to give a more professional outfit for you. And suddenly I'm using a particular platform and I'm building it. I'm just speaking to it and it's developing right there live. So it's fascinating to see that. But I think even though technology is moving so quickly, that inability to make a decision and start, just go from 0 to 1, another tech term, going zeros and ones.
It's a great book.
But a great book too. So I think you do have to get in and get involved and get your team in your company more tech literate. Education, awareness, talking about what's out there and what are the opportunities to help leverage technology in your job.
Yeah. First of all, I would buy that app. So
would you buy that?
So sign me up.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the conversation that I have where I'm the person that gets frantic about it. Though I go look at do I have a podcast? Do I have a meeting? What do I wear today? And I spend far too much time thinking about that. So please sign me up.
Yeah.
But that idea of education is a really important one because I think that things are moving so quickly that if I'm a leader in the space, how do I keep up? What are the programs? And once again, in that analysis paralysis, I can Google or type into ChatGPT or however I'm getting information these days, AI training, and I get 400 different options. And so I think that we're going to probably get a little bit theoretical here, but the idea of trust as well. What do I know what's good information? What do I know what's bad information? And that idea of evaluation is becoming really challenging. So how are you seeing that kind of come through in even some of the ventures either you're supporting or the ecosystem that you're part of? Does that topic of trust come up a lot?
It does. And when we see that validation of knowing, so to the comment I made earlier about companies that are looking for that validation and they want to know that someone very respectful and successful has used that technology and that's what they're implementing because they're looking for that qualification. They're looking for that case study to say, all right, who did you use? Where did you work? And how was it successful? To help them understand what their ROI could be, to make sure that they're making the right decision, to know that this is a trusted product that's in the community that they can work with. So I think that becomes a factor, that level of trust, and knowing through affinity who else is working and using that particular technology.
Yeah. And Calgary very much so is sometimes the city too. Who's done this first? And I'm sure you've heard that narrative before, especially in some of large enterprise. They're very quick to adopt something, but there's a challenge of who adopts it first.
Yeah.
And so I think that idea of trust definitely builds on that. What are some of the other challenges or roadblocks that you see as companies are looking to kind of bring some of those platforms to market in that corporate space here in Calgary?
Yeah, that's a great question. Getting those introductions, it starts with making connections. And part of my role is to help facilitate that, is just to say, if I'm speaking with one of our larger clients and understanding what some of their problems and pain points are, is trying to find a way to connect a dot to someone else. And that could be a corporate venture capital arm that's looking to invest because there's a strategic opportunity that could help solve a business problem for them. You can look at a large construction company, a development company and say, okay, what's that prop tech, con-tech construction technology solution that could be useful for us? So I think helping out with introductions and understanding the customer's pain points and what they're going through is really important, because at the end of the day, if we're not solving the problems, then what are we doing? So I like to take a more customer-centric approach, whether it's with a startup or a scale-up company or a large client. It's just understanding where their pain points are. What are you going through? What are you dealing with? And then, all right, so what are the solutions that are available and how can we make those introductions?
Do you think that's the skill set or that's the gap that's missing right now, is that kind of that listening and that understanding of what that attachment context is? It's not about the product necessarily, it's about the pain. And I think we've had this discussion before where people sometimes fall in love with the product, not the problem they're solving.
Yeah, and I'm in a really unique position where I'm not looking to sell any particular product.
You're Switzerland.
I'm in Switzerland in this. I've used that example before. I'm not in any particular service line within KPMG. I want to support all of them equally. So that's why I want to take that really client and customer-centric approach. What is it that you are dealing with? What is your immediate pain point? And what's the solution? There might be a solution that we could provide, but we'll make referrals to other organizations that are out there to say, you know what, at your stage, you're a little bit earlier stage, or this is a specialty that I think one of our folks that we know in the community that we work with, we would make that introduction and say, this would probably be best for you to work together there. And so having a referral network and a group to say, let's get you to the right person is really important.
So I want to talk about KPMG a little bit, and I think your role specifically, because I feel like the role that you have is very unique.
It is.
And I think that even as you describe what you did at the beginning of our episode, it's okay now. I probably understand a tiny bit more exactly what you do on a day-to-day basis. But it takes a special organization to play the long game like that. Because I think we can say that your role is not about how do I turn a wrench tomorrow. It's how do we invest in a community so that in 5, 10, 15 years that you've built up a community that kind of all ships rise at the same time. Is that a unique role in the ecosystem? Are you seeing other things like that, or is that a unique position that KPMG is taking?
It is a unique role. I'm not familiar with any other that's quite like it in the country. There could be elsewhere in the world. The long play that you said is exactly right. It is a long-term investment. It is a focus on supporting our diversification of our economy. We have an incredible leadership team at our office that believes in the future of Calgary and the province. And when we look at, let's say, junior oil and gas and building up relationships with those individuals that have grown massive companies now and have been incredibly successful, we were there in the beginning. We were forging those relationships and working and supporting early days, which led to something very big. And so our team feels that there's something very similar happening in the tech ecosystem, that we are in those junior oil and gas days in the tech sector that we want to be a part of and we want to support. So I am very fortunate to be in the role that I'm in, and luckily it fits with my personality and my skill set. And I said earlier, half my brain's a marketing side and the other half is a sales and business development side. And the term I've used for many years in my previous life was marketing, is bringing those two together. When sales and marketing work together really well, it can be very effective.
I've never heard that term, and I might steal it. It's marketing.
Please
Okay.
do, yes, marketing. So just before KPMG, I was at a tech startup for 2 years, growing and scaling that across the prairies. And before that, just over 13 years in real estate and community development across Western Canada.
And so community marketing and marketing, that's all part that's all part of your DNA.
That's it. Yeah, communities.
Yeah.
I've literally developed, sold, marketed actual communities that people have lived in, and now we have the community at large, the tech and innovation community.
I feel like there's a tagline. It's like from physical communities to, I don't know, your marketing brain probably does that one better. But,
From the physical to the meta.
my goodness, there we go.
You put me on the spot.
Trademarked, yeah. But to build that kind of innovation, your role in essence is an innovation within KPMG to say, okay, we see this opportunity, we're going to peel this orange a little bit different.
Yeah.
How does that innovation fabric, because KPMG is not a small organization, right?
It's a fairly large startup.
There we go. There's your euphemism check.
Well, I feel like I'm actually a startup within the organization,
right?
Because it's so novel, this working with this community, because again, we're not selling services to startups. That's not the goal. The goal is to build a relationship, connect them, help them grow, so that when they become, and I can't mention the names, but the very large companies that we do work with in the country, that we've developed that support. And there's certain companies that we've been there from their very first pitch, and they've exited or they've IPO'd. So I think that's that opportunity that we want to nurture and work with.
But it's a special opportunity that you have, but how do you remain autonomous in a large organization, and how does that culture get created? If I'm a large oil and gas company in Calgary, let's pick something that's topical, and I'm looking to replicate some of the success of creating something innovative within my own organization that isn't slowed down by we'll call it bureaucracy, by the large organization, like what are the tips that you would have that have helped create your ecosystem within KPMG to allow you some of the autonomy and some of the flexibility to do the things you need to do to be innovative and creative?
Yeah, innovative and creative, those are the two big points. And I'm just thinking of sitting down, being client-centric, coming up with, and you've got to have an understanding of what's out there. You have to know who's out there, who's doing what, why do I attend all the events and conferences and post on LinkedIn. The way I do is that I'm constantly researching who are the companies, who are the sectors, where is the growth and opportunity, so that I can make those introductions and bring those up in conversation. And then being creative about things too, and just trying to connect the dots. I'm constantly going, oh, there's someone here that I think would be really great to help solve that problem. I wish I could turn that into my own AI and just get that into a computer and help leverage that. But it's, at the moment, a lot of it is sitting up here.
Yeah, at least you have the right initial for it. Get artificially in there, it could work. That's right. So we have a mutual friend who's also been on the podcast, Lindsay Smiley, who shared an analogy that I love, which is this idea of tankers and speedboats.
Yes.
And I feel like I've latched onto her analogy way too much. But do you think that's what's being created with your role in the group that you're running, which is you have this tanker, which is KPMG, and the ability to deploy these little speedboats. Yeah. Is that kind of the structure that you think works?
And we should mention that we were on a panel together at the Calgary Chamber. I moderated a panel. And
the fun and funny panel.
The fun and funny. It was meant to be some good jokes there, and we did crack a number of dad jokes. It's interesting. I normally always have my key cards on the side of me, so to gain access to the building. So I have 2 office locations, one in Bow Valley Square and one at Platform Calgary. And if I could pull up the key cards, it would be the perfect time to do that. I have a sticker on each one. And for the KPMG card, I have a giant ship. And why? Because we're a large organization. There's safety and security and knowing that it's a large organization. But speed, obviously, is a different factor in a large organization to a smaller one. And then on the other key card, I have a rocket ship to be that reminder of, I'm involved in a community where there's companies that are moving fast, but they're also potentially dangerous, right? They might not last. And I was at a company that the same thing happened, where it didn't quite make it, but it was a great learning opportunity. So that tanker and speedboat, I live that every single day. And when I think of that concept, I also think of when people talk about disrupting an industry. That's a word that I have taken out of my vocabulary. I don't like using the word disruption, because I believe what companies should be looking to do is innovating and working with industries, not saying, hey, we want to do this and totally disrupt. And the odds of that happening is really low. Buy a lottery ticket, you probably got a better odds of becoming the next Uber or Airbnb. So instead, look to the industry that you're wanting to innovate with, because those companies might be the ones that could be your exit. They could acquire you. That's a pilot opportunity. That's an opportunity to learn. Whether you're in construction or legal or wherever, the idea should be about collaborating and innovating together, because that's what's going to get the best result in the end.
And I love that you shared that idea of collaborating as well, because I feel like there's so many people that feel like they need to do these things in a secret dark cave and unleash them as they're perfect. And the ability to work with industry hand in hand, the ability to work with a community to develop in public almost. I feel sometimes, and maybe this is from a legal standpoint, the terrible advice, but I feel like building as a community is so much more fun and so much more rewarding and better than trying to do something off to the side all by yourself.
Yeah, I agree. And it doesn't have to be everything's open source, but collaborating with industry, working together. There's just a lot of opportunity to work together and solve those problems. I also look in organizations for entrepreneurship, opportunities for, and in some ways I'm a bit of an entrepreneur within the organization. It's great to foster an innovation culture, to have people think creatively and come up with ideas. And if you're going to fail fast, but at least you tried. Because again, if you don't go that 0 to 1, you won't know, you won't advance. And if you get it wrong, that's okay. Learn from that, pivot, move quickly, and on to the next thing.
Yeah. There's a really interesting podcast episode with, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Astro Teller from Google. So he essentially started Google X, not to be confused with what Twitter became, but it's like the Google Moonshot Lab. And he shares this really interesting story around if you're trying to build and I'm going to butcher this as well, but if you're trying to build a Cirque du Soleil act where there's a monkey juggling on top of a giant 80-foot tower, everyone always focuses on building that 80-foot tower first. And then they get 9 months down the road and they've built this magnificent tower, and then it's okay, now we need to train a monkey how to juggle. And they saved the hard stuff at the end to not fail fast because they want to be able to show progress. And is that one of the fabrics where you're seeing either, whether it be corporate entrepreneurship programs, whether it be startup founders, et cetera, the ability to fail fast and learn if the monkey can juggle first?
Yeah, I think and you have a safe space to do that. You have a space that you can, fail quickly and learn from that. It's funny, we've got space in the background here, but there's examples with NASA where they've built the technology but not the software, and they've shipped it. And then, by the way, we're going to upload that software over time because, we weren't there yet with the technology, but we knew we would be in the future. That's a great analogy for the idea that companies can start developing and putting that innovation first mindset into employees. And we might not have that technology here today, but we're working towards that. And again, we talked about Star Trek, Star Wars. It's having an imagination and creativity and foresight into believing that this is going to come down the road. So I'm a big fan of those types of thinking.
So and I'm just making a giant leap here that I feel like we're both a little bit of sci-fi nerds at heart. We're entering an era where imagination becomes a little bit of the secret sauce.
I love that you're talking about this. Creativity, imagination. This is so critical. Let's build on that too, because the phrase knowledge is power, it's so wrong. Applied knowledge is power, right? The application of that. So there's so much knowledge and information that exists. So how do we apply it? And that's where we bring in that imagination and creativity and how we're going to apply that. Asking my wife, what would you do if you built an app? What would that look like? And suddenly there's something net new that we've created. What's a problem or issue that you're dealing with, that your clients are dealing with? And let's get creative about solving that. And do the really crazy, wild future thought, and then start to backtrack from there and go, okay, what are the steps that would take in order to get to that? What would be that solution?
I agree completely. Like, we are in an era right now where the how actually isn't that hard. The hard part, right? You had your clothing app and you put it into one of the platforms. Like, I was going to start naming them, and I feel like we could have an episode on that too.
That's true.
But the technology isn't the hard part anymore. It's the creativity, it's the people, it's the story. And I feel like that is incredibly exciting and unlocking because the guardrails are off and we can do some really cool things. I feel like there's also some really scary things that happen, and I won't turn this into the episode of what's hiding around the corner.
That's true. Although for the season finale episode, maybe you want a bit of a hook for the next season.
Should we have a cliffhanger? Maybe we need a cliffhanger
moment.
And then we can have you back in season 2 and we can just leave people hanging across the summer. If there's one thing that people need to take away from this episode, and there's 2 personas that I want to focus on. The first is, if I'm a business leader, I'm running a, we'll say, mid-sized organization, I have that feeling that I know I need to use technology. I know that it's important. I have no clue where to get started. From your perspective, like very practically, what are some of the first things that I could do to start to either get comfortable around it, to start to make meaningful progress, just so I can start to put myself in a headspace to move forward?
Two things. I'm going to give you two things. The first is something my father said at our wedding.
Oh my goodness.
Quote.
Okay.
So he quoted Ted Lasso, who quoted Walt Whitman. Be curious, not judgmental. Be curious. Curiosity, I think, is really critical right now. Be curious about what's out there. Don't be afraid of it. Now, a good amount of fear is important. Treating things with some skepticism and understanding things. Questioning is always really important. But just be curious about what is out there to help solve your problems. And the second is creativity. I think that is such a critical part. It's something that I love. It's one of my skills that I really enjoy, being creative about problem solving. In your organization, if you're a leader of people, foster that creativity with your team members. Have them think outside the box. Have them be creative about, if we could solve this problem in any way you want, how would it be? Yeah. And having diverse teams in your organization are really important to have diversity of thought. Someone could be coming from a different culture or background or history, and they might have a solution to a problem because of that diversity of thought. So that creativity just adds. You just get more creative in a team when you have more people that are thinking creatively. Yeah.
Does that calculus change when you think about an enterprise leader? So if you think business leader for mid-sized organization to CMO of large insert oil and gas company, does that calculus change, or are those two ingredients the same thing that they're going to need to be able to move their organization forward?
I think you want to leverage the people that are around you, whether they're from outside the organization or within, but I think you want to make sure you're surrounding yourself with those attributes in people to be curious and to be creative. Yeah. So that pressure for one person to be everything to everyone, that doesn't always happen. That's not the case. Someone who's maybe more analytical might not feel as creative. But surround yourself with people that are thinking that way, that can add to the conversation. And you're not surrounding yourself with just hearing that echo chamber and hearing the same thing over and over. So have diversity in the people that are around you so you can get an outsider's perspective.
I love it. And what about from a startup perspective? So if I'm someone that has a great idea, if I want to get started with building out that idea or building out my own company or get started on that entrepreneurial journey, what words of wisdom would you have for them?
Know that it's going to be challenging, that it is not going to be the headlines and an easy ride. There are going to be challenges along the way. And it's, if you're on social media and you just see the nice photos of someone on a vacation or life's all great, it isn't actually like that. So just know that you're going to be in for a ride, and that the most important quality for anyone that's in that is going to be grit and perseverance, is getting through it. So look to organizations and support groups that are out there, mentors, advisors, people that are trusted. I want to shout out to the Venture Mentoring Services of Alberta and many other groups that are out there that can help. Earlier I was listing Accelerator and Incubator Program, CDL Rockies is another organization. So there's lots of folks out there that want to help and support you. And that's part of the thing that I love most about being here in Calgary. When I moved from BC to here, I was born and raised in the Okanagan. I just love the people here. I thought they were just so helpful. And I knew it by being on a bus or a train. People were talking to one another and very open. And, oh, let me connect you with this person, that person. So I think that's important, is to be around people that want to help support you. And it takes a village.
Yeah. I actually didn't know you grew up in the Okanagan, because I also grew up in the Okanagan.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah, Kelowna.
Oh, get out of town.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Mount Boucherie.
You were in Mount Boucherie. I grew up in Lakeview Heights.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so I was just down the road. McCartney Road actually was.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so I was born in Penticton, grew up in Kelowna, and then lived throughout the Okanagan all the way into Lake Country.
Practically neighbors.
Yeah, practically neighbors of Boucherie. Absolutely.
There we go.
Yeah.
From a Calgary perspective, so I feel like I could ask you 100 more questions, and I know that we're starting to come up on time here. But from a Calgary perspective, what are the things that you see coming ahead for us for the Calgary ecosystem? I know it's an incredibly exciting time. What are some of the bold predictions you have about Calgary and our technology community?
That we're going to see that next evolution of those many startups that are out there scaling and growing their business and going international and attracting more attention and focus on the city. So outside investors, venture capital, more private equity investment into the city. I think we're going to see more family offices and high net worth individuals getting more involved in investing in our city in progress. I'm excited for data centers. That's going to be really fascinating for the province. I think we could have a really unique opportunity and a competitive advantage for access to compute, reducing latency and price potentially too. We'll see where policy comes in for opportunities to help support these companies, because compute is going to be a big thing in the future. So yeah, maybe that could be a big attractor for a tech company elsewhere in the world to say, hey, this is the best place in the world for you to start and grow your business here in Alberta.
Amazing. Is there, if you were to wave a magic wand and have one thing come
Magic wand
true,
question.
the old magic wand question, if you were to have one thing come true around the Alberta tech ecosystem?
I think my biggest thing is I would just love for everyone in the city to know more about the companies that are here. I just think that's the big thing. And just getting back to marketing brain and just promoting and thinking about that. And yes, on the sales side too, I'd love them to work with one another and subscribe to those softwares and to implement them. I just think awareness is really key. Get to know those companies. If you're tapping your card at the grocery store or you're looking to implement a technology in your company, get to know what's out there just in our own backyard. So that would be my big thing, is I want people to know more about the companies that are here.
I love it. And I'll have to give a shout out to Tyler Chisholm, because I feel like I stole his
magic wand.
Magic wand. I know he just celebrated his 500th episode. And that was the big billboard. So I feel like I might have ripped off that question. So thank you, Tyler. Final question of the day, and this is the real hard hitter. This episode is releasing our season finale on July 7th.
Yes.
Our first day of Stampede.
Yes.
Words of wisdom for people that are embarking on Stampede today.
Oh, yeah. So this is one that I learned very late in the game. When I moved to Calgary, I bought a pair of used cowboy boots in Vancouver at a thrift store. Big mistake. And I wore them for years, and I begrudgingly walked through Stampede in very sore feet. It was only recently that I purchased a pair of custom-made cowboy boots. They are definitely worth the investment. So I'm very happy with my custom cowboy boots for Stampede. I think proper footwear is really critical for Stampede.
There you go. That's a very sensible recommendation.
Yeah, it's a sensible answer. Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ian. If someone wanted to learn more, if they heard what you said today and they wanted to pick your brain or ask you questions, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you, with KPMG?
Yeah, I think you probably know the answer I'm going to say is LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there. If you're also looking to just follow for news and information and sharing great stories of companies that are out there, please feel free to follow and connect with me on LinkedIn. And Keith, I just got to say, you have one of the best voices for podcasts. For anyone that's out there listening, you've probably got to admit that this has just been a great sounding podcast as well. So hopefully there's been a lot of information too.
The questions were terrible, but the audio was fantastic.
Disagree. The questions are fantastic. So thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, and really appreciate having you on, Ian.
Thanks so much, Keith. Thanks. Cheers.